You admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
I'm asking you the questions, my friend.
Yes, I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil.
Ricardo Munoz Ramirez was born on February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 children whose parents were Mercedes Munoz and Julian Ramirez, 2 Mexican immigrants. As the years went by, he was better known as Richard Ramirez. When Ramirez was 2 years old, he had a bruise on his head after a sideboard fell on top of him, resulting in him having to get more than 30 stitches. Then, at the age of 6, he was diagnosed with epilepsy. Strangely, as Richard got older, he started to fear death, and so he started to spend some of his nights in the cemeteries all alone. His father was a very strict person, and didn't think twice to physically hurt his own kids, or his wife whenever he felt it was necessary. Richard had a cousin named Mike, a former soldier who served in Vietnam, and unfortunately, he was more than a negative influence on Richard when he was just 9 years old. Mike was a very violent man who constantly told bloody stories to Richard about the war, in which he happily explained how he raped, tortured, mutilated, and killed Vietnamese women. To prove this, Mike would show Richard Polaroid photos of the cruelness activity that he was a part of. According to Mike, killing the innocent Vietnamese women was like being God. He also enjoyed hitting his wife and loved it when Richard was there to witness it. Witnessing and being a part of these violence made Richard mentally and emotionally stronger. Mike would also introduce Richard into smoking marijuana. Eventually, Mike ended up murdering his wife in front of Richard. After a heated argument, he grabbed his shotgun and fired directly at his wife, annihilating her entire face, instantly ending her life. Of course, he ended up in jail, but was released beforehand due to claiming that he was drugged. Free from his wife, Mike and Richard decided to get drugged on a daily basis. After all, Mike also introduced Richard to much more powerful drugs other than marijuana. Due to these actions, it led Richard to multiple times getting arrested for illegal possession of drugs, and also got arrested twice for stealing vehicles. The crime wave began on June 28, 1984. That night, he was taking cocaine and left his home completely drugged. He got in his car and started searching for any victim. He stopped in front of a house in Glassell Park, and he entered a home through a window that didn't have protection. Upon entering, Richard made his way to the master bedroom where Jenny Vincow, who was 79 at the time, was sleeping. She was repeatedly stabbed. Richard had made a cut so deep in her throat that she was nearly decapitated. Once dead, Richard started raping Jenny's dead body. On March 17, 1985, Richard Ramirez arrived at the home of Maria Hernandez, a young woman who was 22 years old, who shared a condo with her friend Dale Okazaki, who was 34 years old. The condo was in the neighborhood of Rosemead. This specific night, Richard was dressed entirely of black with a baseball hat. As he waited for a victim to arrive, Maria drove into her driveway when all of a sudden she was attacked by Richard. Richard fired one shot towards Maria's face, but her reflexes were so quick that the bullet ricocheted off her keys. However, she was still injured on her hand. She fell to the ground and played dead. Richard entered the home. When Maria noticed he wasn't nearby, she escaped. Upon entering the home, Richard found Dale Okazaki inside. From outside, Maria heard a gunshot from where she was hiding, but her curiosity was killing her. So she went to investigate near her window, where unfortunately she was spotted by Richard and was shot in the forehead, instantly murdering her. Soon after, Richard left, losing his baseball cap, which was later found by police. He entered his vehicle and started looking for other victims to target. As he was driving, he spotted Tia Leon Yu, who was driving a car. He followed her a couple of miles until he forced her to stop near Monterey Park. Richard got out of his car and went to her window. Leon Yu started screaming, and so Richard proceeded in shooting her twice in the chest. Jose Duenas, a neighbor, went to his balcony on the second floor to see who was the woman that was crying for help. Duenas went back inside and called police. He then went back to the balcony, but Richard was already fleeing. In that very moment, another neighbor arrived with his girlfriend, at which moment he was able to get Richard's license plate number. These two neighbors would later state this in court. Police found Leon Yu alive. She was able to hang on until the ambulance arrived. However, she died moments later. From her autopsy, doctors noticed that the bullets used on Leon Yu was the same bullets used in Richard's previous crimes. Richard continued his murder madness on the morning of March 27th. He arrived at the home of Vicente Zazzara, an immigrant from Italy who was 64 years old and owned a pizzeria. Vicente lived with his wife Maxine. Richard knocked on the door various times, but Vicente didn't want to answer. However, his wife insisted in him opening the door. Vicente listened, and so he let Richard in, resulting in him shooting Vicente in the left temple, murdering him. Richard made his way to the master bedroom, eventually finding Maxine Zazzara, who was 44 years old. Richard fired a shot in her head, but she stayed alive. While she was suffering in agonizing pain, Richard proceeded in getting her naked, and so he raped her. He then went to the kitchen and got a knife. Then he stabbed her in the throat, her abdomens, her breasts, face, and even her vaginal area. He then eventually ended up gouging her eyeballs out, where at the moment Maxine died. Richard left her naked body on the bed, and on the bedroom walls, with blood, he wrote the name in which he was now about to be known, the Night Stalker. For the sake of the video and the length of it, I won't say all the murders that Richard has committed. I'll leave it up to you guys to search them up. But keep in mind, the murders I did mention was just the tip of the iceberg. Followed by the murders of the Zazzaras, a full-scale police operation yielded no concrete results, and Ramirez repeated his attack pattern on pensioners William and Lily Doy in April of 1985. Over the next 2 months, his murder rate escalated rapidly, claiming another dozen victims in a frenzy of burglary, assault, and brutal violence, complete with satanic rituals, and driving Los Angeles into a panic. After the press demanded that the police do more to catch the killer, a dedicated task force comprised of hundreds of law enforcement officers was established, and the FBI stepped in to assist. This relentless media and police pressure, aided with photo-fit descriptions from his surviving victims, forced Richard to leave the LA area that August. He moved north to San Francisco, taking his first victims there, Peter and Barbara Pan, on August 17th. His unmistakable MO, complete with satanic symbolism, meant that his Valley Intruder moniker was no longer applicable, so the press quickly coined a new name for the criminal, the Night Stalker, as most of the assaults took place at night at his victims' homes. Ramirez's next and final attack on August 24th, 1985, led to the identification of his stolen car by the victim 4 days later. After a televised appeal, the car was found, complete with his fingerprints inside, and his criminal record enabled the police to finally put an end to the Night Stalker. National television and print media coverage featuring his prison photo, along with a series of clues from witnesses and survivors, led to Ramirez's capture on August 30, after he was badly beaten by East LA residents while attempting a carjacking, and police were called to the scene. Ramirez claimed that he has been mistakenly identified and did everything possible to delay the onset of the trial, which saw him charged with 14 murders and 31 other felonies in connection to his killing spree. Because he changed his legal counsel a number of times, and the geographical spread of his attacks also complicated the scope of the trial with jurisdictional issues, some of the charges against Ramirez were dropped in order to expedite what was becoming a long journey to justice. Almost 3 years later, after his apprehension on July 22nd of 1988, the jury selection process began. The case took a full year to hear, given the number of witnesses and sheer amount of evidence. During this time, Richard attracted a large cult-like following, many of whom were black-clad Satan worshippers who appeared daily at his trial. One of his supporters was Doreen Leoy, whom he married while serving time in prison. Further unsettling the jury was Ramirez's own nonchalant behavior. Yet another delay occurred when one juror was found murdered on August 14, 1989, but rumors that Ramirez had orchestrated her death proved unfounded. On September 20, 1989, the jury finally returned a unanimous guilty verdict on 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 sexual assault charges, and 14 burglary charges. On November 7, 1989, Ramirez received 19 death sentences, to which he responded, quote, "No big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland," end quote. He was subsequently transferred to San Quentin Prison in California. Following his conviction, Ramirez was linked to several more vicious crimes, most recently in 2009, when a DNA sample connected him with the April 10, 1984 rape and murder of a 9-year-old girl in San Francisco. After 23 years on death row, Richard Ramirez died on June 7, 2013 at the age of 53 from complications related to B-cell lymphoma. According to San Quentin corrections officers, Ramirez's death came shortly after he was taken to Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California. Till this day, Richard is still considered one of the most ruthless, cold-blooded killers to ever step foot on Earth. He terrorized communities for years and made everybody feel unsafe even inside their own homes. Fortunately, for all the innocent people who were suffering from fear and anxiety due to his cruel actions, this came to an end. But one thing is for certain: Make sure to keep your doors and windows locked at all times. You never know when a psychopath, devil-worshipping criminal might come after you.